Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our discussions on 1970s disaster movies. And I'd like to focus our attention today, if I may, on another very intriguing, interesting film, this time from 1979, so the tail end of the decade, the 1970s. This is one whose screenplay is by Nelson Gidding, and it is produced by Irwin Allen, and it is directed by Irwin Allen. This stars, among others in its really extraordinary cast, people like Michael Caine, Sally Field, Carl Malden, Jack Warden, Shirley Knight, Shirley Jones, Slim Pickens, Peter Boyle, Telly Savalas, Veronica Hamill, Angela Cartwright, Mark Harmon, and others. This is a very interesting film. It is also a sequel to an earlier disaster film from early 1970s, 1972. That film, that earlier film, is called The Poseidon Adventure. And today, its sequel, the one that I'd like to talk about a little bit today, is here. It's called Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. Now, as I say, this is a sequel to the earlier film, The Poseidon Adventure. And in fact, it is so because it involves the same situation or same environment, namely the luxury liner SS Poseidon, caught in a storm and due to other circumstances. It has a bunch of passengers and crew, obviously. And during this particular storm, New Year's, and what happens is it capsizes. And so the liner becomes bottom up, stranded in the middle of the ocean. And the film, The Poseidon Adventure, the earlier film, focuses in on a core group of characters caught inside this particular liner that's capsized, or it's now bottom side up, and they have to try to survive and escape this particular disaster. A very famous film for a number of reasons. And full disclosure, I will probably talk about the film The Poseidon Adventure later on in the 31 days of discussions on disaster films. But for now, for today, I'd like to focus on the sequel, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, because while we have the same circumstance or situation, we have Beyond the Poseidon Adventure dealing with, in essence, a whole new or different set of characters from different vantage points. In fact, what we have is the storm, and then the liner turning upside down, stranded in the middle of the ocean, and then we have, that's essentially the start, the very start of the film, and then for the remainder of the film, we have a whole new group of characters that essentially try to, from the outside, go back in to this particular SS Poseidon, because they are trying to, or they say they are trying to, maybe claim some kind of lost cargo, salvage rights, as well as perhaps trying to find some further survivors within. And perhaps there are further secrets that will be revealed along the way. And so we have essentially a different perspective, a different set of characters. And so while this is a sequel to The Poseidon Adventure, it is itself its own film. And so therefore, one need not necessarily watch, say, The Poseidon Adventure before watching the film Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. I think one can follow along with this particular story and not necessarily have to rely on specific links with the earlier film, because it is its own plot and its own set of character arcs. And so that's why I think we can say that this film is a sequel, but it's also distinct from the earlier work. Also, I think we have a film that is, because it's a sequel to the Poseidon Adventure, perhaps one cannot help but make comparisons to, say, the earlier film, The Poseidon Adventure. And perhaps one might see in that comparative analysis, say, The Poseidon Adventure working more effectively than a film like Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. And if you feel that way, that is very legitimate, that's very reasonable. And perhaps from my vantage point too, if I had to choose between this film or that film, I would probably choose, in terms of my own personal preference, the film The Poseidon Adventure, because I find that is a very engaging, enthralling film in the disaster genre and from this period, and it is so exciting to this very day, and I cannot wait. I'm looking forward so much to the opportunity to be able to talk about that film, The Poseidon Adventure. But be that as it may, I still think that this film, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, has a number of very entertaining factors to it, which make it, as I say, itself a very potentially entertaining film within the genre. Now, we have to say, first of all, that the film is, once again, set forth in this liner, in this very precarious and dangerous situation. And so we have different, the settings are different and things. There are a little bit of throwbacks to the earlier film in terms of actual sets that are used. The look of a particular set reminds us of what happened in certain scenes of the Poseidon Adventure. But as they go down further and further into the depths of the SS Poseidon, we understand that there are different environments. There is a whole new set of corridors that we might not have seen in the earlier film, or we also see other characters, other survivors that we didn't necessarily see before. And so it becomes its own feel, its own type of story. And that is, I think, further buttressed by the fact that this feels a lot also like, say, an adventure film. It feels like a treasure hunt type of film. If we understand the nature of the story, there's this idea of the cargo of the liner having some kind of gold or jewels or some kind of treasure with high value that Michael Caine, Sally Field, and Carl Malden seem to want to essentially get. And then they meet survivors along the way, and they meet a whole set of characters with their own set of character arcs and drama and melodrama. The Peter Boyle character and Angela Cartwright's character and Mark Harmon's character, for example. Slim Pickens suddenly emerges in a very memorable role. And then we have Jack Warden and etc. And then we have so that's one aspect of this treasure hunt type of story. So it feels like a disaster film, but it's also like a treasure hunt adventure story in that way. And then the other side of that coin is, of course, the character elements by Telly Savalas and what his crew represent, and the sinister threat that they may indeed pose. And then with those sinister threats, sudden turns of plot and character revelation, backstabbing and double dealing, double cross within this capsized SS Poseidon itself, we realize that we are in for a very multifaceted adventure that is part disaster film, part adventure, part treasure hunt, part sort of a race against time. And when you realize, as the plot progresses, what these groups are actually trying to obtain, what the actual cargo is, one realizes, my goodness, what was this SS Poseidon to begin with? My goodness, what was the cargo that it was carrying along with these passengers on this luxury liner cruise? Wow, it really boggles the mind. And that is one of the things that is suggestive of the fact that there is also a very, very wonderfully and charming, cheesy nature to this. So many cheesy elements that are introduced. And that's due in part to the nature of the characters, the outrageous nature of the situations that suddenly turn like a really high octane drama or melodrama or soap opera. And so we have a really wonderfully high charged soap opera set against the backdrop of the overturned Poseidon. And we have Michael Caine, Sally Field, and Karl Malden, who form a sort of triumvirate, a real core of characters of three. And their interplay and their character chemistry is very interesting, very, very interesting indeed. And we have thus another wonderful performance by Michael Caine, who takes it and who really devotes so much of that, how shall I put it, Michael Caine energy, the Michael Caininess. And you devote so much of that Michael Caininess into this particular performance, and it just catapults the proceedings into those further high-charged places of excitement, adventure, treasure hunt, double cross, ludicrous, camp, cheese, disaster flick, and sequel, and stormy seas, and volatile situations, and also sort of a cheesy nature quality of the particular settings and situations. And then, boom, it all fits into this package, which is called Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. So this is a film that falls, as I say, at the very tail end of the decade, the 1970s, and therefore it is a general, or maybe it is one critical perspective on this particular decade or genre, that the films that tended to fall in the latter half of the decade maybe are generally regarded as being not as engaging or not as, say, successful as the films that came earlier in the decade. And if you feel that way, I think that's a very reasonable and legitimate perspective to have. And that might certainly be the case for people in viewing this film Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. That's okay. I'm not claiming that this is the best film that I have ever seen in my entire life. But I am saying that it does feel different enough from the earlier film to make it its own thing, and it's those ways of making itself distinct from the earlier film, I think themselves are sources of the entertainment, and they go over the top, and they go big, and they go quite melodramatically soap opera-y. But that's the great thing about films like this. That is so wonderful thing about this, because you think, my goodness, where else can they go? Where else can they push the envelope? And you realize that in films like the Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, they are just pushing the envelope to the point of breaking point, and the envelope is ripping, and it's just being torn to shreds. But that tearing into shreds of the envelope is part of the fun, because that creates this say, shower, which is like confetti, and it's like a party atmosphere filled with the envelope confetti that's falling through the air, and you realize, wow, this is happening, that's happening, this is happening, that's happening, wow, this is really what's going on with this character, wow, this is a double cross, wow, there's gunfights, and there's a kind of triangle of characters here. There's a intense love interest, romance, and also friends and loyalty, and also the sinister aspects of who these characters really are. They may not be who they say they are, and then at the head of the proceedings, leading the way, is the one, the only Michael Caine. So it is what it is, my friends. Beyond the Poseidon Adventure is Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. You may like it, you may not like it. That's okay, my friends. But it is, I still think, a film that offers, potentially anyway, some pretty sizable doses of potential entertainment for the reasons that I was trying to explain. Does it hold up for everyone? As I say, it probably doesn't. And does it suffer perhaps from comparison to its earlier film? I think it does, to the eyes of many. But it is also its own film, and it is also its own set of entertainment values, and also it is its own set of characters with their own concerns, their own character arcs. And my goodness, when you follow each of them to their conclusions, it becomes this remarkable, shocking, and over-the-top cheesy and yes, entertaining spectacle that is still part of this genre, 1970s disaster movies. This is the film called Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now, and I must say again, full disclosure, I will probably talk about the film The Poseidon Adventure in a later video in this 31 days, but in the meantime, if you are interested, this is the DVD that I have of this film, so a very interesting film indeed to have in case you are interested. But that's it for now, my friends, Beyond the Poseidon Adventure. So until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. So thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.